morning. Now, those of you who make your own wine will know how long it takes. Apart from having to grow the grapes in the first place, you've then got to wait for the juice to ferment, and that can take up to 50 days just for an ordinary new wine. Now, there was a time in a little place called Cana where Jesus was invited to a wedding, and his mother was there and some of his disciples with him, and they were guests at a wedding that had run out of wine. That was the biggest faux pas that anybody could have in those days, to run out of wine at a wedding. So here we have Mary. She goes and says to Jesus, come on, help these poor people. They've run out of wine. Now, John, he records this miracle as the first in his gospel. I mean, why doesn't he choose something more impressive like walking on water, raising somebody from the dead, healing somebody's crippled hand and making it new again, healing somebody of leprosy? Why doesn't he do that? But instead of that, he chooses Jesus turning water into wine as not just an introduction to Jesus Christ, but almost as his inauguration. So what is so important about this miracle? Now, don't forget, right at the beginning of John's Gospel, he introduces us to Jesus as the Word, and the Word was God, was with God, and nothing was made without him. So he's actually using this miracle of water into wine to show us that Jesus is a creator, the creator. He can create things from nothing. He has power over all substances, over liquids, over solids, over space, over time. Jesus is the creator. John, he wrote his gospel considerably later than the others, and even though he was commissioned to be an apostle to the circumcision, that is, to the Jews, here he is bringing the gospel to the Gentiles. Now, we know this because of the language he uses. He has to explain to his readers what the Hebrew words mean and what the Jewish rituals mean. So John is talking sometime after the destruction of the temple by the Romans. And it has become obvious to the disciples at this time that God had widened his circle and was now calling and including the rest of the world, us, the Gentiles. Now just imagine for a moment if you happened to be there at this wedding. Suppose you were one of the servants and you heard Mary say, come on, you must help these people. And you see Jesus and you know that he's asked for water to be put into these jars. 6 enormous jars that hold up to nearly 40 gallons each. 6 of them filled with water. And he says to the servants, go, take it to the master of the ceremony, the master of the banquet. Oh, can you imagine what it must be like? How frightened would you be? Wouldn't you be shaking, taking a cupful to the master of the banquet? And he tastes it. And you're probably thinking, oh, please don't be angry at me. Imagine this poor servant. His heart is pounding, he's shaking, wondering what this master's going to say when he drank it. And the master takes a sip and he exclaims, not what the hell is this, but wow, this is the best wine I have ever tasted. And unlike everyone else, You've saved the best to last. I bet that servant ran back as fast as he could, back into the company of Mary and Jesus and the other servants. And I bet they partied amongst themselves and thanked Mary and Jesus profusely. You see, the master of the banquet, he's equal really to our modern day master of ceremonies. He's the one in charge. He's the presider of the party, of the celebration. Now, why would Jesus create wine just to save a dying party? Jesus, you see, he is the master of the banquet. And when you read Isaiah 25, you hear the words, Lord of hosts, he will make for his people a feast of the finest meats, of the most well-refined wine. And he will swallow up death and remove grief, and he will wipe away our reproach. Jesus says, I am the Lord of the feast. I am the master of the banquet. I am Lord of the wine. And I come to bring you festive joy. Now, you see, most people who don't go to church don't go for maybe the reason that they were brought up as kids, being told to go to church and found how boring and restrictive it was. And maybe that's why you don't go to church. You are actually, though, rejecting the Lord of the feast, the Lord of the wine. See, Mary asks her son to help. And don't forget, she knows exactly who he is. She, remember, had the angel visit her and tell her what was going to happen and what her child, or rather who her child was going to be. So what does Jesus say to her? She says, you must help them. He says, woman. He doesn't say, Mum. He says, woman, why are you involving me? My hour is not yet come. This is quite a sharp response. Why? Why would he talk like this? Probably because his mind was on something else. Now, it wasn't simply a fact of that he wasn't ready to do a miracle, and then she managed to change his mind. So it's not as if he said, no, I'm not doing a miracle, and then said, oh, all right then. It wasn't like that. No, he would have been thinking about his own wedding. Like we do when we go to a wedding. You think back about your own wedding day. Or if you're not married, you think about a wedding day that might still be to come. His wedding day. He's thinking about his position as bridegroom. The church as his bride. He would be thinking about what it will take to provide wine for his own wedding day. So what Jesus has answered is, it is not yet my time, the time of my death. So anyway, Jesus takes 6 ceremonial washing jars. Now these jars are filled with water and they are used by the Jews as a cleansing ritual, cleansing of sins. Now remember, Jesus' blood makes us clean. Remember, Jesus takes the cup at the Last Supper and says, this is my blood shed for you. First, for Jesus to celebrate his wedding, he must go through the taking of the dreaded cup, his hour. Think about how Jesus relates to us. I am the king, you are the subjects. I'm the shepherd and you are the sheep. But all of a sudden, he's now the groom. And he's saying that we are the bride. The bride is always beautiful and the groom is always amazed at her beauty. So when Jesus calls himself the groom, he is giving complete reception to you, to me. So Mary says they've run out of wine. To receive Jesus as the bridegroom, you have to be at a stage where you feel empty, completely out, blown, as if you've blown everything. Then at the end of this day, the bridegroom, he gets all the credit for the work that Jesus has done. He gets all the praise that Jesus has earned. That's what it's like to be a Christian. To receive all the credit and all the praise for something Jesus has done for you. Jesus earned everything. This miracle, you see, is a sign, and it shows that we can go to God with just even the simplest little thing. Jesus used his divine power to simply remove the embarrassment of two young people. You see, every little problem is not too small for his detailed care. Notice, though, one other thing. We have to submit to his timing. He says, "It is not yet my time." But then he actually suggests something that at first might seem to be unrelated or even unproductive. Remember this when you pray. You can ask for something, and at first he may give you what seems to be no answer at all. And maybe your life starts to look as though he's not even in it. But learn this from Mary. You see, she didn't say to Jesus, "How dare you speak to your mother like that?" No. She says, "Do whatever he tells you to do." Simple. She remembers, you see, that her baby is God incarnate. She remembers who he is. To do whatever he says. Simple. And you'll never get a blessing if you don't.